Redditors who have gone/were declared missing. What is your story? I had a mental breakdown in 2015 after losing a job after having a hard year, so I packed a bag, got on my motorbike, and rode to a party spot, Gold Coast. I got out enough cash to hold me over for a week and turned off my mobile before I left town. I spent a whole week just hitting the beach, partying, hitting bars and clubs. I stayed at a backpacker hostel and hung out with random backpackers. Overall it was an amazing and refreshing week. I left to ride back home. Just before the Great Dividing Range I got pulled over by the cops. Turns out, my 2 coworkers I saw after I got fired were worried, so they came by my house just to check up on me. My housemates then didn't see me for a few days after being told that I'd been fired, so they searched town and reported me to the cops as missing. I had a known history of depression and suicidal tendencies. The cops searched through my records. No mobile phone activity, no social media activity, no contact with family members. So it turns out, while I was off trying to just escape my crappy life for a week, everyone thought I'd killed myself or something. My license plate number was flagged, so when I went past the highway patrol it must have come up on their computer to pull me over. The cop was actually quite nice. He mainly just wanted to know I was okay. He called in and had me removed as a missing person. In Australia, once you're listed as a missing person you have to be cited and verified by a police officer to be removed. I got home 8 hours later to a lot of worried people. I honestly thought no one gave a frick about me. If I knew it was going to cause so much trouble I would have at least left a note. Man, that's great that you had so many people worried about you, and I think that's a great sign to always keep your head up even when life's got you down. You have people who love you and will be there for you even if you don't know it. Someone who cares doesn't necessarily have to be a person who is in your life 24/7 or knows a lot about you. It can be difficult to figure out who you can ask for help, but there are people who are willing. The story of how I went missing is also one of my first memories. When I was 5, I went on holiday with my family to Scotland. We were in the middle of nowhere surrounded by nothing but land dominated by trees. There wasn't much to do, so my sister and I played hide and seek. I thought it would be a great idea to hide right next to the front door of the cottage we were staying in, inside of a giant bush. I watched my sister look for me for about 5 minutes until she clearly gave up and went inside. However, I never give up on anything and decided to stay until I was found. After a short period, 15 minutes or so, more people started playing the game. I now watched my parents sprint around in front of me while I silently giggled in the bush thinking I'm so good at this game. More and more people started to play, other holiday goers in cottages nearby, park rangers and police. I stayed in that bush for hours and hours until it got dark, having the time of my life. My sister was only 7, so she didn't help look for me and just sat by the doorstep. As it got darker outside, my yellow jacket got brighter, and after a whole day of searching for me in the nearby woods, my sister realized I was stood right next to her. Best game of hide and seek ever. Honestly, this sounds like something I did. They say your kids get revenge by growing up to be just like you. I'm dreading the day my son gets into hide and seek. My niece has a habit of playing hide and seek without telling anyone she's playing. My daughter, 3, doesn't get to play hide and seek with her. Mine was weird because I was also a teen runaway, but was actually with my parents. In a nutshell: 1. Ran away from home when I was 14. 2. Lived on the streets with friends or in shelters for 2 years. 3. My parents moved away from that city, so I was left behind. Long story there, but they tried their best for me, but had to let go. 4. Last known address was with a boyfriend who was arrested along with his best friend, who was dating my best friend. Landlady obviously evicted them both, which led to me having nowhere to go. Ran out of options in the middle of winter. It was a middle of the night blurry event that resulted in me having nowhere to go. My best friend was able to go to her family somehow or somewhere. We got separated that night and vowed to find each other and regroup and figure it out after some sleep. 5. At this point, after 2 years, just before my 16th day, I called my parents, who drove several hours and picked me up at a McDonald's at 5 AM and brought me back to their new city. I was determined to start over and get on a good path with the lone support of my parents and leave the old life completely behind. The only person I told was my best friend at the time, and I remember we were both crying. She wasn't sure about her family and asked me that once I got settled, maybe she could come to my family as well for a new start. 6. She went missing right after that, which I didn't know right away. I had one phone call from her where she told me things weren't good and she was trying to get money for a Greyhound ticket to come to my new city. My boyfriend and her boyfriend were both in jail at the time. Since the four of us were known to be together when she went missing, the police's first priority was to find me, but no one knew where I was, so the police themselves marked me also as missing along with her. My parents had a different last name than me, and I was a minor, so there wasn't a whole lot of information on me. Basically they knew I was an underage street kid who couldn't be accounted for. Hoss' best friend was also missing. 7 maybe 2 months later, I was settled into my new life. My parents registered me in school, bought me new belongings. I had lost everything. When the landlady kicked my boyfriend out, I got a part-time job and they also got me a therapist through some sort of free social services that got my name into the system. The police has also pieced that her last call was to a number in the same city where I was now registered in social services. While at school one day, the police showed up and brought me into the guidance counselor's office and asked me a hell of a lot of questions that I don't remember now, but I do remember them telling me I was a missing person and then grilling me about knowing where the other girl was, who I didn't even know what missing, and that I had to know something. But it was just a really bizarre coincidence that I had burned out on street life the same time she went missing. The most tragic part of this story is that she had died. Her body was found later that spring after the snow melted, which I saw on the news. They said she froze to death. No foul play. I had nightmares for so long about this that she was knocking on my bedroom window pleading to come in from the cold. That was all late 80s. News back then wasn't so dramatic as it is now, and even her death was a small clip in a newspaper, no headlines or anything like that. There was no Amber Alert back then, ESP not for street people with criminal boyfriends. The only reason the police were after us was because her mother reported her as missing. A lot of it is a blur to me now, but in 2007, when FB started getting mainstream, I got several messages from people I knew back then saying they thought I was dead, and was it really me? It was really bizarre. Old friends from that city had said that we both went missing. My friend's body was found, and they never knew what became of me. I'm sorry for what you went through, and the loss of your friend. As a paramedic, we once attended a call for a male with sore feet. Attended a lay-by by the side of a road to a perfectly polite chap who did have some very nasty blisters. He'd been to a family funeral, got a bit upset, and had gone for a walk to clear his head, then just kept walking for 4 days. Turns out he was from the same area as where I grew up, about 250 miles away, and we reminisced about the countryside and some of the good pubs, etc. He admitted that maybe he was a bit depressed and probably needed some help. Unfortunately, all we could offer was a trip to hospital, but we did what we could. Later that shift, I'm perusing Facebook and see an old school friend has shared a missing person appeal. It's our walking patient. I rang the police and told them where our chap was, and they were very pleased, as they expected a dog walker to find him hanging somewhere. 250 miles, my god. Well done for going above and beyond for him. Appreciate what you do. I believe he means he lived around 250 miles away from him as a child. Or I'm stupid. Not me, but my hubby, and this was years ago. Hubby was about 8 or 9 years old when he and a group of boys were approached by some middle-aged Italians to sell candy. The kids were loaded into a van and taken to neighboring towns to hawk this candy. At some point the kids started asking when they were going home, as the van was going further than they were expecting. A few kids started crying, then out comes a gun and they are told you're not going home. More tears, and then the van stopped, I believe for a bathroom stop, but it was near an open field. A few of the kids decided to make a mad dash through this field, being chased by the men, and made it to a grocery store. The authorities were alerted and their parents came to collect the children. They were about an hour away from home when found. Hubby is 55 now and hyper-vigilant about the grandkids and stranger danger. Which country was this? Sounds like he is very lucky to have survived being trafficked. United States, early 70s. When I was in elementary school, like 8 years old, my brother and me were good friends with two guys who were brothers as well. Same age span. One weekend we were all playing northeasts at their place first, and later my friend and me were outside doing stupid things kids would do. Sometime my brother leaves with his friend and comes over to us and tells me that our parents called. They will stay a little longer at my aunt's and uncle's place this night. Nothing too special, but they told him we shouldn't mind our time and can stay outside as long as we want, as long as we sleep at home that night. Jackpot. I trusted my brother blindly on this, and we proceeded to do stupid stuff like kicking over trash bins. The evening fades and my friend is about to leave to get some dinner and sleep. His parents were also away. I didn't think a second about going home because I was allowed to stay outside for so long, and I will definitely enjoy it to its fullest. It is already really dark, and I trample down some patches as I wander through my hood. It is beyond 11:00 PM and this is really late for a 8-year-old when I see a car approaching. I was always good with remembering license plates and immediately notices that this are my parents. Since I was raised well behaved, I did what was right. I waved at them as they were passing. They didn't see me first because they immediately hit the brakes once they did, jumped out of the car, screaming, and threw me in the back. I had no idea what was happening, but was sad that it looks like the night of my life was over. At home I noticed that my mom called the local police telling them that I was safe back home, and my dad struggled between punishing me and just being glad I'm home alive. This is when I was able to tell them what happened and why I wasn't home when they came back. You know, bro told me that you called and allowed us to be outside as long as we want today, so I'm not understanding why you are so upset about this. You guessed right. He had no idea what I was talking about. Not exactly sure, but I think it took my brother something around 15 years to admit this. Wow, your brother set you up, lol. Not very eventful, but I was probably in 1st or 2nd grade when we had taken a family trip to Las Vegas. We had spent a lot of the hot day in Circus exploring the arcade, rides, and tomfoolery they had going on, but at night we went out to explore, no clue where. There was some kind of crazy light show. This white awning above a walking path filled with people, music, and all of these neat lights and lasers flashing around, being cast onto the covering. I think I stared at the lights too long and tried to keep following my parents without really looking where I was going. By the time I looked for them, they were nowhere in sight. Suddenly the music was scary, too loud, and I couldn't listen for my parents. When I called out for them, the crowd instantly seemed thicker and the lights almost distorted what I saw. It all seemed so disorienting. I started crying because I lost my parents and they weren't answering. When I called out for them, a man came up to me in a uniform, maybe security or police, and was very kind to the tiny terrified human and helped me look for them. I'm sure this whole endeavor wasn't very long, but it felt like an eternity. We eventually found them. He tapped my mom on the shoulder and said something like, "I think you may have lost this." She responded with a no and carried on. And that is my story. That place with the lights is Fremont Street, or the Fremont Street Experience, Ike. Pretty crazy place for a child to get lost. Mainly that end of the strip, at least when I lived there almost 20 years again, is much seedier than the other touristy attractions. Tweakers and crap all over. When I was in like 3rd grade I remember going to the strip with my parents and being handed xxography by strangers in crowds. Like leaflets that street vendors are handing out for a business. That business was prostitution, lol. Thanks. I had no idea where it was or what it was. Gosh, I feel like Vegas is this crazy land of extremes. Those leaflets always make me uncomfortable when I see them. Very different than my regular world. One Christmas my mum wanted to pay a visit to her infamously crazy sister. Nobody else wanted to go. She was a bad person. So was mum, really, and mum seemed a bit upset. I took one for the team and hopped in the car with her. Mum told everyone we would take about an hour and would be back in time for lunch. In and out. In actuality, we were there for 4 hours. It wasn't a pleasant visit. I stood in the lounge in silence, scared to sit down, because I couldn't spot a chair that wasn't covered in junk. Semi-hoarder situation, listening to my mum and her sister gossiping about trivial things and collecting intel on people they knew. You might think intel was a strange choice of words. I said earlier that my auntie is a nutter. I guess it's time to say that my mum is also not right. She is one of those people who obsesses over others, like a stalker, and will collect information about others, even total strangers. Then she uses that information to manipulate others. Turns out my auntie is the same. They spent none of that 4-hour visit talking about normal things. They weren't interested in how the other was doing. Nobody cared about the kids or work or anything like that. Nobody spoke to me for hours. They just gossiped about strangers and collected intel for their weird habit. I cannot stress enough how uneasy I was in the presence of these women. It was such a surreal moment witnessing my mum go full nutter in front of me like that. She was always so careful to hide that kind of behavior. When we finally got home I was exhausted and everyone was frantic. We had been gone for hours longer than we should have been. My phone was at home. I figured I didn't need it. Mum turned hers off. Summer and Christmas are peak road accident times. My family heard police sirens in the distance and was scared we had gotten in a car crash. Dad and my sister even drove around looking for us. Mum was not apologetic. Gosh, are you okay now? Hope things are better for you three.